Hi, welcome to this video on demography. Let's get started with a few definitions. Demographers are experts in the study of statistics relating to the changing structure of human populations. Demography is the study of human populations. To project population trends, demographers use three basic demographic variables: fertility, mortality, and migration. Fertility refers to the number of children that the average woman bears. The crude birth rate is the number of live births in a given year for every 1,000 people in a population. Mortality is the incidence of deaths in a country's population, and the crude death rate is the number of deaths in a given year for every 1,000 people in a population. If you look to the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you will see the leading causes of death for people 85 and over in the US. On this slide, we can take a look at the crude birth rates and crude death rates on the slide on the left-hand side, and life expectancy around the world on the chart on the right-hand side. And this data comes from 2016. So you can see on the left-hand side of your screen that the crude birth rate is relatively low for North America and Europe. But notice that the crude birth rate for Africa is extremely high. Going to the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that life expectancy is relatively high in most regions of the world, with the exception of Africa. The third variable is migration. And migration refers to the movement of people into and out of a specified territory. There are two forms of migration. Immigration refers to movement into a territory, while emigration refers to movement out of a territory. When you put these together, you get net migration rate, which refers to the difference between the number of immigrants and emigrants per 1,000 population. So this is looking at population change across the US, which basically is migration around the US. And the counties listed in the brown colors are counties that are losing population, and the counties represented in green are gaining population. So notice that in the southeastern US, most specifically Florida, there are a number of places that are gaining population. You can also see that trend in Texas and out in the western part of the United States. Now we can look at population growth in global perspective. And the thing that should jump out at you here is that there is a lot of growth in the Middle East and in Africa. I want to show you the US Census Bureau's website. They have two really neat things. On the left-hand side of the screen, we are looking at the estimated population of the US on June 4th, 2020 at about 9:50 a.m. The estimated population is 329,743,481. And you can see that there is one birth about every 8 seconds. There's one death about every 12 seconds in the US. There's one international migrant coming into the US about every 46 seconds. So when you combine all of that, we have about a net gain of one person every 17 seconds. So you can see that this number is slowly going up. Over here on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see a very different story. You can see the estimated population of the world. Currently, 7,653,838,754, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's tremendous growth in the population of the world. Where is that population? How is the world's population spread out? Well, China. China has more people than any other country in the world, followed shortly behind by India. And it is expected that India will surpass China in population in about the year 2024. China has about 1,394,000,000 people, whereas India has about 1,326,000,000,000 people. Let's look at population growth across many years. It took from the beginning of time up until the year 1800 for there to be 1 billion people living on Earth all at one time. That was a very, very, very long period of time. And then it only took about 130 years for us to get to 2 billion people living on the planet all at one time. So if you look at the dates here, you can see that it takes less and less time to accumulate an additional billion people living on the planet all at one time. The chart here on the left-hand side of your screen looks at a very long period of human history, and you can see that the population was very steady for a very long period of time, and it's only been relatively recently that the population has surged. And that's what this graphic looks at on the right-hand side of your screen. All right, there has been tremendous growth in world population over the last 200 years. And again, that population growth is not evenly distributed throughout the entire world. There are certain areas of the world that are growing much quicker than others. For example, you can see that East Asia and Pacific are growing relatively fast, along with South Asia. And you can see the other regions of the world and how they are growing at a slower rate. Thomas Malthus warned that while population grows geometrically, that's from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, the food supply increases only arithmetically, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So he was very concerned that population growth would outstrip our ability to produce enough food for everyone globally. But not everyone agreed with him. Other researchers point to what's called the demographic transition. And the way that you read the demographic transition is by starting on the left-hand side of your screen. Stage 1 is a pre-industrial country that has very little technology. Their population grows very slowly. So the green line represents the birth rate. The yellow line represents the death rate. So you can see that in a stage 1 pre-industrial society, they have a large number of children, but unfortunately, a lot of those children will die. When you move into stage 2, which is the early industrial period or stage, you have rapid population growth. The birth rate remains high, but the death rate goes down. Why? Well, because more people have access to better nutritious food and healthcare. So this is where population surges. When you move into stage 3, the birth rate will start to go down. Why? Because it is expensive to have children in industrialized countries. And the death rate stays low because people have access to nutritious food and clean water. So the population will start to subside. When we move into a post-industrial society, much like what the US is currently in, stage 4, we have a very low birth rate and we have a low death rate. So we have a steady population that grows very slowly. This is interesting because this is a population pyramid, as they were called, and there are two variables that it looks at, and that is age and sex. And so on the left-hand side of your screen, you see a population pyramid for the US, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you see one for Mexico, and compare the two. What you should immediately see is that ours is kind of a little fat in the middle and slims down a little bit at the bottom at the top. But notice how Mexico's is very much like a pyramid. So what is this showing us? This is showing us that Mexico has a very young population that's evenly distributed among females and males. So as people get older, they die off and they have a very small older population. But in the US, we have a large number of middle-aged people and a much larger older set of people living in the US. All right, so that's the demographics based on age and sex shown in a population pyramid. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you back soon. Bye-bye.